Hello everyone, it's Mimi here, BMS working in the NHS. And today's video will be about the first module of the Section 1 in the IBMS Digital Registration Portfolio called Personal Responsibility and Development. So, just a quick introduction to this video. It will be short and sweet, I promise. It will be focused on the learning outcomes, different types of evidence, and HCPC SOPs that need to be met in this module. We will then discuss evidence justification and we will finish with some ideas for evidence you could use in this module. With all that said, I hope you will enjoy the content of my video and I hope you will learn a lot. So let's dive into the first module. These are the learning outcomes you should meet by the end of this module. You should be able to demonstrate skills that are required for an effective practice as a BMS. You should understand what HCPC requires of you as a healthcare professional. And you should be able to justify the importance of your CPD throughout your career as a BMS. When you complete this module, come back to the learning outcomes to see and check that you have actually met them. This is the mandatory piece of evidence. The task is to produce a personal statement that demonstrates your understanding of the limits of your practice and how you act accordingly. So let's break this down into smaller pieces. For this I will simply use colored text to make it a bit easier. First part of the evidence is asking produce a personal statement. A personal statement is a short, reflective piece about you and how you think you demonstrate something. The second part of the evidence is asking you to demonstrate your understanding of the limits of your practice. Because you are early on in your career, your practice might be limited. Therefore, you need to be able to demonstrate this understanding of your limits of practice. The last part of this evidence is asking you to state how you act accordingly. Basically, it is asking you to state how you personally act when you know you reached the limits of your practice. IBMS also offers their own advice on how to approach this mandatory evidence, which I think is very good. Again, I broke it down into smaller, bite-sized sections that highlight nicely what exactly has to be included in this piece of evidence to meet the relevant HCPC standards and be acceptable for the IBMS. So it starts telling you that this piece of evidence has to be written in a style of a personal statement, so write it in such style. Then it is telling you what the personal statement should be about. You should describe your training experience in the laboratory, and for that, you can use a specific example. Then, it is asking you to reflect on activities you can now perform autonomously, following your training. Again, use a specific example, as it will make this piece personal. Remember, it is a personal statement. Then it is asking you what types of training did you need? So think about the example you used. What training was required for you to be able to do this example task autonomously? How long did it take to learn it? What was your trainer like? Was it only one thing you needed to learn, or multiple, such as labeling techniques, use of LIMS system, specific instrument, and so on? Make it relevant example you mentioned earlier. Then it is asking you to explain how you know you are working to the required standard. Think about your training, the training documents, who your trainer was and their experience. Think about the SOPs, whether you read and understood them, whether you know how to find the SOPs if you needed them, and so on. Once again, make it relevant to your example. Then, you need to select a specific example you will be using for this part of evidence, and state what it was, and how you reached the limits of your practice. You could either stick with your previous example, or use a new one to demonstrate how you reached the limits of your practice. Then you need to include how you are seeking advice to resolve issues. You also need to include how you are learning from this, to improve your practice for the future. Now let's talk about the HCPC SOPs that need to be covered by this piece of mandatory evidence. The first SOP is, recognize that they are personally responsible for and must be able to justify their decisions and actions. The way I understand it is, I am personally responsible for my own actions and decisions at work, and if someone was to question my actions and decisions, I need to be able to justify them. My actions and decisions need to be in accordance with local policies and procedures such as following the SOPs or standard operating procedures. The second standard is, exercise personal initiative. The way I understand this standard is, do I wait for people to tell me what to do all the time? Or do I use my own initiative and go find the answers I need by myself? Do I use my initiative to improve my own practice for the future? Or do I keep asking questions over and over, not improving my practice? Do I use my own initiative to learn something new to improve my practice and grow as a professional? Or do I only learn what I need to do the job, and that is it? Do I use my own initiative to share my knowledge with others to improve the overall service for our patients? Or do I keep what I have learned to myself? The third standard is, understand the value of reflective practice and the need to record the outcome of such reflection to support continuous improvement. By learning how to reflect on your practice, and actively applying reflective practice into your day-to-day activities, you will understand its value and how it improves your practice. When you be registered BMS, you will be expected to keep a CPD record, which can be requested by the HCPC for the review, when you're renewing your registration, which is every 2 years. By starting your CPD record early on in your career, you will get into habit of doing it, and it will in return greatly improve your practice. So start early, regret it. So, those are the standards you have to keep in mind when writing your personal statement. So, now that we have finished with the mandatory evidence, let's have a look at the choice evidence 2 and 3, which are the candidate's choice evidence, and Q&A set by the trainer. They both together have to meet 9 HCPC standards. And if you download the module descriptors for the registration portfolio from the IBMS website, you will find some example evidence, suggested by the IBMS, which is very handy. These are the HCPC standards that have to be covered by those 2 pieces of evidence. Let's explore each one of them. The first standard is, identify the limits of their practice and when to seek advice or refer to another professional or service. You need to be able to demonstrate that you can effectively identify the limits of your practice, and you know when to seek help from another professional. You can choose an example from your own personal practice when you reached the limit practice to demonstrate your understanding. For example, you were trained in a task, and as you were doing task by following the SOP either unsupervised or under supervision, you came across something that was incorrect or different to usual, and you did not know what to do, you simply did not know how to continue. When we learn new tasks, we often don't know what to do because our knowledge and understanding about this new task is not yet extensive. The important thing is our ability to recognize that we do not know something, and therefore we seek help. The second standard is, keep their skills and knowledge up to date and understand the importance of CPD throughout their career. You need to be able to show you are keeping your skills and knowledge up to date, and why you are doing it. This also links nicely to the importance of CPD during your career as a BMS. You could link this standard and example from the previous standard when you reached the limit of your practice and expand on this. You could add that you have taken some actions, sought help, resolved the issue and gained new knowledge and understanding that improved your practice. Then you can bring in the CPD. The third standard is, maintain high standards of personal and professional conduct. Conduct is a combination of attitudes, behaviors, and ethics individual displays. This needs to be professional, and mainlined throughout your career as a BMS. You could evidence it by discussing how you act at work. Are you respectful, with positive attitude, helpful, team player who cares about the patients and colleagues? These behaviors usually show in your day-to-day practice or in stressful situations or during an argument. You could use those as examples to demonstrate your high standard of conduct. The fourth standard is, promote and protect the service user's interests at all times. You need to be able to demonstrate that you know who the service users are, what are their interests, and how you promote and protect those interests in your day-to-day practice. Patients, GP surgeries, clinicians, doctors, they are all our service users with their interests that you need to promote and protect. How do you personally do it in your practice? The fifth standard is, understand what is required of them by the HCPC, including but not limited to the standards of conduct, performance, and ethics. To meet this standard, you need to know what HCPC expects of you. To achieve that, I would recommend you read the HCPC Standards of Conduct, Performance, and Ethics, to ensure you understand them and you comply with them. This standard links nicely to the third standard, so maybe when you are talking about your attitudes and behaviors to demonstrate your professional conduct in third standard, bring in the HCPC Standards of Performance and Ethics as well. That will allow you to expand nicely on the third standard and also meet the fifth standard. The sixth standard is, understand the importance of capacity in the context of delivering care and treatment. You need to be able to demonstrate your understanding that the patient can make their own decision about their healthcare. Remember, patient care we provide is a patient-centered care. The care is about them, with them. Consider seeking consent, acting in best interest of the patient, proper documentation. You could use a sample that comes in with the consent form like a POC as an example. The seventh standard is, understand the scope of a professional duty of care, and exercise that duty. As a healthcare professional, you have a duty to care. How do you understand this duty? How do you practice that duty? What do you care about when you come into work? Do you approach each sample with care and respect? Do you treat each sample professionally? Do you have in mind that each sample belongs to a patient, for which you have a professional duty to care about? The eighth standard is, understand and apply legislations, policies, and guidance relevant to their profession and scope of practice. You need to understand and be able to apply any legislations, policies, and guidance that is relevant to your BMS role. Consider HCPC standards, IBMS guidelines, NHS policies, and clinical governance. Find out about what they do and why, and add how you apply them. How do they impact your scope of practice? You could also consider Health and Safety at Work Act, COSH, Data Protection Act or Equality Act if you want. The ninth standard is, demonstrate awareness of the British, European, and international standards that govern and affect pathology laboratory practice. First, you need to know the standards, then, you will be able to answer how they affect our practice. Think ISO 15189, the scope, the focus, accreditation, current version of the ISO standard. Then think UKAS accreditation, NHS England standards or IVDR, which is in vitro diagnostic regulation. You could also consider ISO 9001 for quality management system, or ISO 22367 for medical laboratories. How do they affect your laboratory practice? Always have those standards in your mind when you are selecting a piece of evidence and then when you are writing it. Because those two pieces of evidence that you choose have to demonstrate all those 9 standards. One more thing you have to include when choosing and writing your evidence. And that is the evidence justification. For the mandatory piece of evidence, the IBMS has provided a very good justification why they would want you to do that piece of evidence. I would strongly advise you to read their justifications, as this can form the basis for how you should be justifying your choice of evidence. You should also include which specific standards you have met by each of your evidence. These are some suggestions from the IBMS that could be used as your choice evidence in this section. They are pretty good, and can meet several standards, which is what you need and want. And these are some ideas of evidence types worth considering for this section as well. Again, they can meet several standards as well, which is the goal. I would also like to share with you some helpful tips that can make your portfolio look really good. Try to present the information in various formats such as tables, pictures, photographs, diagrams, flowcharts, graphs or even videos, if you can. This nicely breaks down a lot of text that is usually present in specialist portfolios. Try to make it a little bit more interesting to the reader, which will be your training officer and eventually the verifier. Try to put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to read hundreds of pages of plain text? There is a saying I really like, and it goes like this: a picture is worth 1,000 words. I will make a video where I will share with you my evidence I used for my portfolio back in the day. Hopefully that will help as well. Also try to use various types of evidence, not just one type, like case studies, for each subsection. You could use experiments, case studies, annotated results, annotated photographs of you performing tasks, evidence of troubleshooting, annotated EQA results, nonconformances, validation and verification evidence, comparisons of different approaches and their pros and cons, control material production, certificates of course attendance with reflective statements, annotated images or charts, and so on. Try to bring in your personality. Think about the ways you like to learn best. If you like experimenting, perform experiment. If you like troubleshooting, perform troubleshooting. Choose something that demonstrates your understanding, knowledge, skills, and how you apply this in your practice. And one more thing, keep the competence requirements in mind when you selecting your evidence. Good evidence will tick off several requirements. And this brings me to the end of today's video. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding about the standards that are within this section and how to meet those standards with relevant evidence. And my final take-home message? Keep those standards in mind when selecting and approaching your evidence. Bye for now.